Hello, my name is Christopher Kyle, and it's February 9th, 2014. Today I will be discussing The Tragedy of Puddin'head Wilson by Mark Twain from a critical race theory perspective. This presentation was crafted for California Baptist University's English 401 Literary Theory and Criticism class. Before beginning with Puddin'head Wilson, I would first like to discuss Ian F. Hanley Lopez's The Social Construction of Race. This article, published in 2000, discusses critical race theory in depth. Lopez begins his article by discussing the court case Hudgens v. Wright and its real-life protagonist, Hannah Hudgens. Lopez relates how Hannah Hudgens sued her owners for freedom during the period of slavery. He tells of how Hannah was successful in gaining her freedom solely based on her appearance, including the length and quality of her hair. Lopez uses the arbitrary ruling of the case as an example of how race is a social rather than biological fact. He continues on to establish that race is a fact and is not what he calls an illusion. It just isn't based on genetics. He states that there are no traits specific to a single race, not even skin color, and he uses the case of Takao Ozawa's application for citizenship as an example. In Ozawa's case, he used the argument that his skin was fairer than those of the white Americans and thus should be granted citizenship. A major element of Lopez's article is racial fabrication, which is an adaptation of the pre-existing theory of racial formation. The major difference between the two comes from Lopez's belief that race must be crafted or fabricated rather than naturally forming. In his segment about racial fabrication, Lopez writes that race is man-made, integrated into society. The significance of race changes quickly rather than slowly, and lastly, is created relationally. As a side note, I find that this last point shares some commonalities with Saussure's assertion that difference generates meaning. Lopez's assertions apply directly to the subject material of chapters 3 and 4 of Puddin'head Wilson. These chapters depict the character Roxana, a slave in Mississippi, switching her fair-skinned, blue-eyed, socially black child with her socially white slave owner's son of the same age, and the result of those actions. At the beginning of chapter 4, Twain depicts the false Tom as developing in the stereotypical way a white child would, describing him as sickly, spoiled, and articulate, whereas the false Chambers grows up to demonstrate servile qualities and develops a strong constitution that was believed to be natural in African Americans at the time. Neither child struggles to adapt their roles, steered by external forces, proving that the issue is social rather than genetic, as Lopez argues in his article. Another issue covered in Puddin'head Wilson that Lopez discusses in his article is the topic of physical characteristics. In Twain's novel, both Roxanne and her son are described as having characteristics that would be traditionally described as white. They are indistinguishable from their white counterparts, despite being treated differently because of their genetic background. This makes them perfect examples of the principles of Lopez's racial fabrication theory. Lopez's first assertion in regard to racial fabrication, which is, quote, humans rather than abstract social forces produce races, is seen in the arbitrary assignment of black or Negro to these two characters despite their similarities to their white counterparts physically. His second assertion, that races constitute an integral part of a whole social fabric that includes gender and class relation is seen in Roxana's fear for herself and her child being sold down the river into an even more harsh form of slavery. This fear is the result of the social implications of her race during that time period.